Are you finding yourself in situations where you're not sure if your photos are over-edited or you don't know when to stop? So if your answer is yes, then you're in the right place. I've seen this struggle oh so much with the students I work with. They often tell me it's hard for them to know when to stop. And I know it gets a bit tricky knowing when is enough, like you have lots of sliders and it's just fun to play with. And also there's no one specific value someone can give you, so it gets a little bit tricky. What is more, editing is like a very subjective matter, which is actually a good thing because we don't all the photos look the same. And your editing is actually a part of your style and how you distinguish yourself from other photographers. When it comes to food photography, it's easy to get carried away with editing. After all, we want our food to look delicious and as tempting as possible. But it's also important to remember that over-editing can actually have the opposite effect. So always look at your photo as someone who is gonna eat that food in the photo. Does it look appetizing? It kind of goes the same with any type of photography. You sort of want to keep some sort of integrity in your photo. So how do you know when you've over-edited your photos? Well, there are a few signs to look out for. So let's see where you could potentially be making some mistakes in your post-production. And I'll share the one I see most commonly at the end, so make sure to stay all the way to the end. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more content that will help you with your photography skills. Alright, so one sign of over-editing is if your colors look too saturated or undersaturated or just unnatural. Because food should look fresh and vibrant, but not like it's been artificially enhanced. Or if your style is to desaturate colors, they should still have enough color to be recognizable as that color that it is in real life. So just always keep the reality as your checking point. So let's imagine you were editing lettuce and increase the saturation of greens. The salad would suddenly appear so saturated that it borders neon colors. So who would eat a salad like that? Of course, you most likely wouldn't go all the way to the neon side, but there's kind of still a point where it starts to look artificial or unrealistic. So look for that point. One of the biggest culprits of over-editing is brightness and contrast. While these are important elements to adjust in any photo, it's also easy to go too far and end up with an image that looks blown out or artificial. So instead, you just want to keep the look very natural with just like a slight boost of contrast and brightness to make the colors pop. One of the reasons why I'm very careful with the contrast slider in Lightroom and prefer to use other sliders instead is because it gives me much more control over editing contrast. This is also something we talk about in the Food to Frame course, so if you want to up-level not only your food photography skills but also your editing, then I'll leave the link in the description box below if you want to check that out. Another tip is to be mindful of your white balance. This refers to the overall temperature and the tone of your photo. If your white balance is off, your food can end up looking too warm or too cool and the colors just aren't what they should be. But you can easily fix this by adjusting the temperature and tint in your editing software, or you can use a gray card while you're shooting. But just remember to shoot in RAW. Otherwise, you'll get a headache trying to fix the white balance that's off. Then there's something that you're probably not gonna face as a beginner, but once you discover the retouching tool, you might. I see this sometimes in the advertising world, and not that there's something wrong with the way they edit the photos, but I do get a feel that in some cases the foods are retouched to the point where they actually look like plastic. I feel like this is very much about personal taste as well. Not my kind of jam to make everything look like wax, but hey, try to discover what feels comfortable for you. Because how much you retouch depends a lot on the purpose of the photo. Like, for example, I rarely retouch photos of recipes I post on my blog. Not that I post very often nowadays, but I try to steer away from doing any massive retouching. The recipes are for my readers who are home cooks and don't want to see perfect cakes. They would probably be disappointed if my cake looked absolutely perfect due to retouching, and then theirs, when they make the recipes, would look completely different. But when you work in the commercial world, you need to retouch absolutely 100%. But again, it depends a lot on how those photos are going to be used, and you also need to discuss this with the client. And finally, the one thing I see the most often: sharpness and clarity. I remember the time when the clarity slider was so popular. Like, you could see people overuse it all over social media, me included. When it comes to sharpness and clarity, it's important to strike a balance between making your food look crisp and clean and keeping its natural texture and details. So if your photo looks like it's been sharpened to the point of looking fake, you've probably gone too far. And this is exactly what will happen if you exaggerate with those sliders. And one other thing will happen, like you'll start to see texture in your photo that wasn't even there in the first place if you go overboard when you go crazy with any of those tools that enhance texture. So always remember to zoom in your photo once in a while to check that too. In summary, when it comes to food photography, less is often more. Aim for a natural and authentic look and be mindful of your editing choices. Don't be afraid to experiment, of course, but remember that your goal is to make your food look as delicious and as possible without crossing that line into looking artificial. So if you're a food photographer, take a step back and ask yourself if your photos look natural and authentic. And if you're not sure, get a second opinion from someone you trust. Remember, less is often more when it comes to photo editing, so don't be afraid to just let the food speak for itself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.